Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session of Women in Divorce. Today, we're looking at the unique challenges for women during separation. My name's Emily Beven, and I'm a senior associate at Stowe Family Law. So I do have a lot of experience talking to various women in lots of different scenarios that are looking for some reassurance and some guidance as to how to progress with this process, whether that's separation or divorce. So today we're hoping that we'll not only provide everyone with some good information about what that process might entail, but also to discuss some of the issues that might arise within the process, some issues that we encounter more often than not, especially when it comes to women. But we also want to leave you feeling empowered in the knowing that you're not alone in how you're feeling when you're looking or thinking about entering into that process. And you're not alone when you're feeling a little bit down on yourself whilst you're actually going through it. There's a lot of anxieties around this area, and it's a huge thing in your life to make a decision to separate from someone. So we want to make sure that you're empowered throughout the process and know that you're getting everything you need and getting all the access to the support that you might need throughout that process. So I know, for one, that during my time as a solicitor, there's tons of common themes that emerge when you're dealing with clients, both men and female. But today, and given that we've just celebrated International Women's Day, woohoo, we want to focus on the concerns and issues that might be keeping you guys awake at night, so that, again, we might make you aware of some of the solutions available to you, make you feel comforted, and again, empowered with the information we're going to give. Information is absolutely power, and that's something I tell my clients all the time. I have two friends joining me today to assist with this. Would you like to introduce yourself, ladies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ceri Griffiths. I'm a divorce financial planner. My company is Willowbrook Lifestyle Financial Planning, and I work with women where there's a power imbalance and the divorce is normally complex and wealthy. And I bring a level of expertise to the table to help women understand what financial decisions mean in the greater context of their lives.
Amazing stuff.
And I'm Kate. So I combine a role working at Stowe Family Law, but also running a private practice as a divorce coach. I trained and qualified with the Divorce Coach Academy in 2021. And whenever I tell people I do divorce coaching, most people say, what is that? Which I think is quite a valid question, to be honest with you. So in a nutshell, a divorce coach kind of fills the gap between these two wonderful ladies and really focuses on the emotional and the practical challenges that all genders face, but I work mainly with women that they face when going through a relationship breakdown. So I work with people considering it, I work with people going through it, and I also work with people afterwards, helping them to kind of rebuild their lives. I help people make decisions. This is, as Ceri and Emily know, there's a lot of decisions to make in this process, and there's a lot of big decisions as well. So I think a divorce coach really is worth its weight in gold by helping you get in a good place so that you can make those decisions from a really calm, measured, informed position. Personally, I'm an adult child of divorce, and my parents separated when I was in my late 20s, and I in 2019, and I now successfully co-parent with my teenage daughter's dads. So at some point, I've been where you are, and I know how it feels.
So hopefully we've got everyone covered today. We've got Kate with all the experience, providing emotional and practical support to people that are feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the process, which is easy enough to feel. Ceri covering sort of the financial side of things, really, really important when you're going through the process, and me, who can hopefully provide some insight into the legal elements. So we're going to try to cover all that we can within the hour that we have. No doubt we might skip over or gloss over some of the areas that you're most interested in today. So if you do have any questions, there's a chat box open, which you'll see on your screen, hopefully. So please feel free to put in any questions that you might have as the discussion is ongoing, and we'll try to get to those later in the session and answer as many of them as if possible. We want to make sure this conversation is really useful for you and runs fluidly. So again, feel free to put those questions in, and we'll try to make sure that we're touching on the things that matter to you the most. Okay. So where we kind of wanted to start off today is this idea that women are more often the ones that initiate divorce than men. Now, I was thinking about this in advance of session, and it actually isn't true at all to my experience.
Yeah,
I do get a different, I do have a different experience in that I get just as many men as women coming to me at the very early stages of divorce, either having just made that application or made the decision to leave their partner. And all of them have the same worries. How am I going to move into the future? How do I breach these important conversations? How is this going to affect my relationship with my children moving forward? What are my finances going to be looking like? Am I going to be left destitute? Everyone has these same anxieties, and we hear them time and time again, whether that's men or women. And you're not alone in feeling those anxieties. And I think the scariest step to take in the first instance, and you have to acknowledge it, is making that first phone call to someone that you think might be able to help, whether that is a financial advisor or a divorce coach, or perhaps me, and you're looking to understand what your rights will be if you make that decision. We don't bite. Those initial meetings usually end up in you feeling really good and, again, empowered by the information that you're getting following that, whether that results in you making an application right away or sitting on it for a little bit, just in the knowing that realistically everything is going to be okay. That's what we try to achieve within that first conversation. But in terms of the reasons why women usually say that they want to get divorced, in my experience, and I don't know about you ladies, I hear a lot of queries around or issues around money and issues around perhaps the household roles. And it's no secret that us as women carry a lot within a household. And that's just naturally sort of where most of us have landed, with a huge burden in terms of taking care of the children, taking them to appointments, going to all the events, doing the laundry, the dishes, staying well mentally, physically, and doing a job and being empowered boss women like we want to be. It's a lot to carry. And that was just describing my morning this morning. So I think that can create some tensions between couples, and sometimes leaving women feeling like they're not seen or appreciated within the household. And that's a big one for me. And in other circumstances, we have women that have decided to take a step back from their careers for a period to assist in those household roles. And with that sometimes comes a lack of control over the finances, I would say. And sometimes, more often than not, when that's the case, women will come to me and they really, really do not have any sort of understanding of what the family economy actually looks like. And that creates a huge amount of anxiety. The legal process is built so that we get those answers before we're settling for anything. We need to know, what is within the family economy before we're able to start even discussing what any sort of settlement is going to look like. But I'm wondering from you guys, do you find the same themes? And when you talk to people about the breakdown in their relationship, particularly women, or are you seeing something else?
No, I definitely, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think all women are unique and all relationships are unique. But like you say, there is common themes that you see. I think something that I see a lot, and I know, there's this kind of terminology of walk away wife that's kind of bandied about, which I find is so flippant for actually what is a much deeper decision-making process. So nobody kind of puts the cup of coffee down and heads out into the blue yonder and doesn't look back. These are really big decisions. And I know from my own experience, it took me a very, very long time to make the decision. So often women coming into my coaching space is what I see is sort of years of carrying that mental load, years of having to sort the children, the house, the job, the parents, the presents, the school, I always used to say if I wrote down a list of everything I needed to do in one day, I'd probably be quite horrified at the length of the list. And I think within that, there comes a feeling of being quite unsupported and quite validated within that. So I find when women come to kind of my coaching space, they've often really lost sort of sight of who they are.
Yeah.
You know, they've become quite withdrawn, quite emotionally numb. You know, you sort of, I remember getting to the end of the day, particularly when my children were younger, and sort of thinking, I literally have nothing left, you know.
Yeah.
It's 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. I've got an hour of TV. I go to bed, we go again, you know?
Yeah.
And that, I think that constant cycle of it means that, you know I did. I kind of really withdrew into myself, and actually really withdrew from my relationship as well. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's that for me is probably, I'm not saying some men don't do that, have a very small
Yeah.
pool of research, i.e. clients and family and friends, but in the main, I think even though society has developed so much, I think in the main there is a lot of responsibility on women to juggle it all, have it all, be it all.
Yeah. And I think it is, it's important to say that not all men, you know, and women
Yeah,
with this experience, you know, some men are, I would like to think that most men, but that's something of my experience, are very supportive with that and do take some of the load, but it just tends to be that we fall into these little categories within the household, whether that's intentional or not. And one of the main concerns with that for a lot of the women I talk to is, where does this leave me financially? Am I more vulnerable because I haven't been in a position where I can contribute as much financially to the household as my husband has? If I decide to divorce, how am I going to be left? How am I going to care for the children? How am I going to meet my needs? I don't have enough money to purchase a house. And that can be really, really scary. But it's important to note within that context that the contributions within the household are equally as important by law as the financial ones. And so right away, and for many of you listening right now, I'm sure that's a worry on your mind if you're considering making a decision like this, is that you are seen under the law, and those contributions are very important and are considered as such within any settlement. And when it comes to the financial side of things, I mean, we have to send over to Ceri. What do you kind of experience when you're dealing with people going through this sort of thing?
So I would agree with what you said at the start. I don't see the play out of the statistics that say that women initiate divorce more than men. And I do wonder if that's just semantics, and are women the one who just physically press the button that says divorce, but the actual decision, from when I meet with my clients, it doesn't seem to be heavily weighted one way or the other. There's a real mix of who's making that decision. So I'd really love to know, behind that statistic, is it just women the one who get on and actually get the buttons pressed to start the divorce process? Is that what that statistic actually is? Rather than, you know, obviously divorce is decided before that button is pressed. That's just when the paperwork starts. I would echo what you have both said. When you are in a relationship, there are agreed roles and tasks that need to happen to make households function. And we delegate those efficiently and lean into them efficiently. It is common that women will take more of a family role, potentially part-time, and spin plates that are related to that. And conversely, that men will spin plates that are more related to finance. And we are seeing those things start to balance out, but we still have historically a situation where most men understand finances at a level that most women feel that they don't. And when you are starting from a place where you feel that your other half has more of a line of sight and more of an understanding, it is inevitable that that can create a sense of unease. There's three words that I use when I talk about how that picture can feel if we don't put the right foundations in place, and how it can feel when you're really at the extreme end of this. And there is a range. You know, there are those couples where things may be outbalanced in terms of who is managing what, but the relationship is still strong in the way that they actually communicate and what they share. And they will go on to share information really comfortably and have very open and clear divorce conversations. And then at the other extreme, we end up in a situation where clients can feel, because of the dynamic that has developed through their relationship, they can feel outmatched. they can feel ill-equipped, and they can feel financially precarious. And those three things together are what can lead to some really important milestones that prevent divorce progressing. And this is where Kate and Emily would come in. You know, when you have got a client who is feeling these things, they're likely to go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And Kate would be a really good person to be then talking to about those things that are preventing you. So I would bring in the financial insight, the context, helping the money make sense. Kate would then be talking about how the money is landing emotionally and what it might be doing to how you are approaching the decisions in divorce. And then Emily, you would be talking to them about the various routes and what would actually work in the dynamic of them as a couple. So those financial dynamics actually really do have a big impact on how divorce plays out.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really am aware of is how the narrative plays out culturally. And again, how Kate and Emily can really help and support here is, while we may hear from Emily and from the law that our contributions are equally recognised in the law, that our family contributions are equally recognised as financial contributions, that does not mean that that is how your ex-spouse is viewing it at the start. It does not mean that is how culturally within your friendship group, within your familial group, it is viewed. And those narratives can weigh heavy on how things are progressing and where you feel you may be and how you feel things may play out. Because if you have a starting point where everybody understands that your part is equal and you start here, then you can move forward together. But when you've got a starting point that your ex feels that your contribution is here, there is so much work to do to get them to the starting point before you can then even begin negotiation. And sometimes that amount of work to even get them to the starting point is so exhausting, takes so much time and so much cost, that you don't even get to a place where we get to an equitable outcome. Just getting them to a place where they recognise your contribution has been work enough. So I think all of these factors about the fact that if somebody has physically earned the money, it influences and colours how they view it. And then the narratives that we paint around it are reasons that actually a team approach is so vital to make sure you don't just get the legal impression, you understand then the emotional impression and how you deal with other people's narratives. From Kate, what kind of ways that you can position things neutrally to move it forward, and then how as a financial planner you get the confidence to rebuild your relationship with money, which I think we'll circle back to, but I've spoken for ages, so I'll hand back over to you guys.
Yeah, I think oh, sorry, Emily, you go.
No, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, I think that identity piece and that narrative piece is so important.
Yeah.
You know, and again, you know, none of this is that men don't go through this or they don't have a change of narrative or change of identity, but this is a session for women, so we're kind of focusing on women, you know. But you know, you lose so much identity through the end of your marriage or relationship. You know, you were a mother, a wife, you know, a sister-in-law, a daughter-in-law. You know, there's that real kind of identity. And I think when you're looking after children, and even without having children, this isn't just about people with children, but you become part of a couple, don't you? You have couple friends. You know, I remember when I separated from my ex, and it was a little bit like, oh, so who gets who gets the friends, you know? And we're so entrenched in that identity. And I also remember reflecting that all my friends named in my mobile phone were under the names of their children. And I lived my friendship group, everybody was still together. So I had a huge loss of identity and a huge loss of the narrative of what I thought it was going to be. Then you kind of have to do that again through the divorce process, you know. And sometimes I think the women I've worked with in this situation have really underestimated the role that they've played and almost sort of apologized for it, as if, you know, they had the easy ride because they stayed at home. And I work a lot with clients to really change that mindset, to say, but if you didn't do that, then your family or your partner wouldn't have achieved what they've achieved.
Right.
They wouldn't
That's
be able
exactly
to
it.
have a family home like this. They wouldn't be able to have the children, you know. And again, this is anecdotal from clients, but I'm always kind of interested with the men that go out and work and sort of protect, and then a separation happens, and all of it sudden it's, well, you didn't do anything, you just stayed at home,
Right.
you know. Whereas actually
And
that
we're
narrative was
very happy to say, please stay
very
at home. I'm
happy.
happy. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. So I agree with Ceri. I think narrative and identity through this process for women and coming out of it is really important.
Yeah. And the root of a lot of the really contentious things that we see, I think, potentially is that loss of identity, because with that comes real vulnerability or feeling of vulnerability. And when people feel vulnerable, they are in fight or flight. And when the first instinct is to fight, that's not necessarily laying the good groundwork for a very amicable, efficient divorce. And so I think it is really important not only to get the support and information from you guys, but also for both sides to have access to really good legal advice. Because, you know, for the woman in particular to know that your position isn't what your ex is telling you. You aren't going to be left out on the street, and standing in that power is really important when we start things off. But equally so, sometimes lawyers on the other side, or the lawyers acting for the man who entrenched in that position, is most important, because if you're giving clear legal advice from the outset that these contributions are going to be seen as equal, it is not necessarily what they want to hear. Planting that seed early does pave the way for a more reasonable negotiation.
Yes.
And honestly, it can save thousands of pounds. So we're hopeful not only to represent some women and help them to feel empowered through the process, but are hopeful that on the other side, there's also some really good legal advice being given there too. It comes down to both sets of lawyers and our ability to work together.
Agree. Yeah.
And I think what we've touched on already a little bit was our next sort of point, and the reasons why women are hesitant to make the decision to divorce. I mean, we've said it's sort of a myth that it's more women than men. The statistics don't lie, but in our experience, that's not the case. And I think we've already kind of touched on a lot of reasons why women would be hesitant to make that first decision and to make that first move. Kate, do you want to talk about some of the reasons why you think that might be the case and what pressures are facing us in particular?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I work with a lot of clients where they have stayed a really long time, and I think women do stay longer than they want to, and some people stay, and you know what? That's absolutely fine as well. This is people's lives; they've got to walk through it as they want to. I mean, I had a client when I first started training who had stayed for 18 years and then finally made the decision to end her marriage. 18 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Again, everyone's unique, relationships are unique. I would say the biggest thing that I see in the coaching space is people stay through fear. And that fear can manifest itself in so many different ways. Fear of hurting the children, fear of finances. We're living in a chronic cost of living crisis, and I've always been honest about this. I would have really struggled to have left my ex-partner if I hadn't have left him before COVID and the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
The old gas and electricity bills are now eye-wateringly expensive. And I mean, Ceri, you'll see this, and Emily, you'll see this as well. Having to make that decision to move from 2 salaries to 1 salary, and that's for somebody that works full time, is incredibly difficult. And there's a lot of fear around that as well. Where are you going to live? How are the children going to cope with it? What's my mum going to say? What are my friends going to say? How am I going to deal with, actually, if I do this, what will my future look like? What will my pension be like? I just think there's so many what ifs that actually it's that, we've talked about stress responses, and a really powerful stress response is actually freeze, which is actually when you become paralyzed and you can't make a decision, So I often work with women who basically, they don't come to me and say, shall I get divorced? But they will come to me because they can't decide what to do. And we'll do a lot of work unpicking those fears, because obviously, fear is incredibly overwhelming. But I think you said at the beginning, Emily, knowledge is power. So actually having somebody in my space, you know, I refer out to financial planners and lawyers all the time. I would be saying, right, go and speak to a lawyer, because actually you have got better legal rights than you realise. And somebody like Ceri, I'd be saying, go and speak to Ceri, because actually there's probably more in, you know, I mean, Ceri and I have worked together before. There's nothing more red flaggish than a man presenting a spreadsheet and saying that's all the finances, you know? So I think, yeah, fear, but fear can be overcome.
Yeah. And I mean, some of that fear, as we said, is getting all of the information. And part of that process when you're going through the financial side of things is envisioning what this new world is going to look like and how it's going to work and how you're going to survive off one income and what your costs and budgeting is going to look like and how you're going to purchase a new house. And in my view, that's, of course, lawyers can help you sort of looking at that in an illustrative way, but Ceri is where that, you know, that really comes into play, and you can really discuss with people, from my understanding, where they can put their money and how best to deal with things and what things look like. Do you want to talk about how that you can kind of deal with that when they're going through the process?
Yeah, I think it is one of the things that help decisions get made, is having that firm understanding of what the figures are saying. And it starts, I feel, understanding what is on the spreadsheet that he has kindly put together, which is something that a lot of women experience, is this initial set of figures that get shown, and knowing and understanding what that is can really help alleviate the fear, and, you know, help you have the clarity to then be able to understand the starting point. So the first piece of work that most financial planners or divorce financial planners will do with the client is making sure that everybody understands what's on the table and what's not on the table, you know, what hasn't been shared, what else might be coming, what you and your legal team are working towards understanding. And then actually getting to a place where we can help you think beyond just the divorce and into your post-divorce life. I work really closely with divorce coaches to get clients to understand home, family, career, lifestyle, where they are now and where they want to be. The starting point of divorce financial planning really does feel like coaching, because we need that picture to then be able to cost it. And that picture involves some really good questioning. And if you aren't working with a coach or a divorce financial planner, it's a piece of work that you can do on your own with a journal and really just think about what it is that you would want that situation to be. And from there, actually then use resources that are available on Google, ChatGPT, to get an understanding of costs. For example, you may be living in a 4-bed detached house, and actually what you really want to be able to do is to move to a certain village. You establish the kind of cost of that property, and you can then use ChatGPT to analyze what your outgoings could be. So there's spaces and ways that you can do it if you're not working with a divorce financial planner or with a coach. But I would then take the dreams that a client has, and we would use some spreadsheets to understand the cost of her new life and really stress test what that's going to look like. Where we then take that is interesting, because there is forecasting software we use, and it allows us to see how much money is needed for the rest of your life. We overlay that with potential income streams, what you may earn, what maintenance may be, what child maintenance may be, what lump sums might exist, inheritances, and then also what outgoings are going to be that we've just analysed, but also how that changes when your children move home, how that changes when you are in early retirement, late retirement, how it changes based on tax and inflation and investment growth. And that software then gives a picture of how much money you need for the rest of your life, and is really the basis and the blueprint for how we then decide and look at settlements. And so when you are in this divorce process, there will come a point where you or your ex or your legal team will have some ideas about what could be an outcome. And to get the context and to really know, what do those figures mean to me, this is where the software presents that picture, so we can input what somebody is suggesting have a look at it, and then really get a sense of, okay, this is what it would mean to you. Actually, we can do X, Y, and Z, but we couldn't do this part, or we can do it all and there's loads left over, or we're really miles away from what is actually going to work here. And it helps you make more concrete decisions because you can visualize what the money's going to do for you. So that's kind of the work that the financial planners bring to things. And then ultimately, there will be a point that you are agreed and new decisions need to be made, and there are generally financial steps that need to be taken. It could be that you are returning to work and you need to be thinking about what your benefits are in work, what the contract looks like, having somebody to soundboard with. Typically, there are still children, and so there is a discussion around, okay, if something happens to either one of you now, what does the protection look like? And then ultimately, there are often times where pensions are shared, often times where investments are made to support income, and how money can produce an income for life, or how pensions need to be redistributed, requires often financial planners to give you the expertise. What I would say is that it can feel like there is so much to learn when you haven't been the one spinning that plate. And genuinely, in my experience, it is often far clearer and easier than you're expecting. It is not difficult to learn what you need to know about finances. You just need to get some insights and you will easily pick it up. It is not complex at all.
I think that's really interesting as well, and I think that long-term view is really important. I mean, I'm sure you see this, Emily, but I'll be working with clients and they'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just want half the house and that's it. That's it, and I'll be perfectly happy. And actually, that really is a huge sort of. I do a lot of work around sort of like future visualization. When clients are ready, most clients that arrive with me are still in a headspin and cannot sort of see the wood for the trees. But as things sort of calm down, we'll kind of do a lot of like future mapping. And actually, that sometimes is really nice. So if I've got a client that works very well visually, then we'll almost create a description of it. So I actually had a client message me last week, and we stopped working just before Christmas, and her husband had been the big earner, big lawyer. She had a part-time counselling business. Anyway, I won't go into too much details, but they had this massive house. And when I first started working with her, she was adamant that she was not leaving that house. So we worked on that, and I was a little bit like, well, what is it about the house? And when she described the house to me, she described the emotions that the house brought out in her. Wow. And I was like, well, we can package that up, and you can create that somewhere else. So we spent a long time working on what do you actually want it to be. Now, she loved cooking, he hated cooking, and she really wanted a kitchen diner with all her friends and a wood-burning stove and a table that they could all sit round. And she messaged me from the car as her house sale completed, and she was moving to the house, a much cheaper house in an area that she never would have looked at before, but actually we'd worked out that long-term, I mean, not as long-term as Ceri needs to go, which is also very important, but we'd worked out that kind of next step for her. I mean, do you see that with clients, Emily? Do you sort of see some people want to make decisions through fear?
Oh, absolutely. I think it would be a rare case where that wasn't the primary motivation at the beginning. And a lot of my clients will significantly change in their opinion, views, goals throughout the matter as we acquire all this knowledge. And it kind of goes to what the process provides for. So a lot of people, when they first come to us, say, okay, this is what I think the assets are. This is how much I earn, or I'm at home with the children. This is how much he earns. I don't know about pensions. They're never worried about pensions at the beginning unless they have a big one. And I just, I need half of that. Well, first of all, a lot of them have no idea what other assets there might be, right? So we have this very vague understanding of what the other person has and what we have and how much the house is worth and what the pensions might be valued at, etc. We don't know that for sure. So the first thing I say is I cannot advise you as to what this settlement is going to look like right now. You've given me a little bit of vague information. I can't go off that. What I need to do is get all of the information first. And not only is that going to help me to give you really good advice about what your claims could be and what options you might have for your future, but it's going to make you feel more comfortable with whatever it is that we agree at the end, because you're going to know that you knew everything before you made that decision. So the first thing, and it seems to be a theme in the discussion we're having, is getting all of the information. And so some people are quite frustrated at the beginning because they just want to move things forward, but we need to go through that process so that we can understand what the assets of a case actually are. And you will have that, regardless of what steps you're taking in the first instance, whether that's to engage with a lawyer like me and we go through a disclosure process with your ex, or to go to a mediator, they will require exactly the same steps to be taken, because we can't give advice until we know what's in it. Now, when we see what's in it, then we start looking at some of the things that you guys have been talking about in terms of the future. Okay, so some people are super preoccupied with what am I going to do right now, because they are feeling that fear of, I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 minutes, let alone 60 years. But the process allows us to advise about, to provide advice about all of those different things. So not only should you be able to rehouse in a similar fashion to what you're accustomed to, and so should your ex, but you should be able to upkeep the level of standard of living that you've become accustomed to. You should be able to support the children in a way that you're happy with. The children need to be rehoused in a way that accommodates their schedule, whatever's been agreed between you. And we need to make sure that you're put into a position moving forward where you have enough moving into your future that you're going to be able to sustain yourself in a reasonable way. So when I talk to clients after the disclosure process has been done, I ask them, what their real goals are. Where do you want to see yourself? Okay, in 5 minutes when this is over, hopefully. But where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? Where do you want yourself in 10 years? And at that point, we might refer people to people like Ceri, get a really good understanding of what the options for that could look like, while getting advice from us about what their claims are and the extent of those claims push. I mean, this process has a bad rep for one party rinsing the other one and taking everything, and out of anger, receiving everything, and the other one's left with nothing. There are absolutely safeguards in place when it comes to this process that do not allow that to happen. Everyone's needs are seen as the number one priority, so the housing and income needs as well as retirement needs, and that's given a varying amount of weight depending on their ages. And the number one goal of the court, and therefore for legal advisors, is to make sure that whatever settlement is reached is capable of meeting those needs. In order to establish those needs, again, we need information. We need to know from you what house you want to buy, why you want to buy it, what kind of mortgage could you raise, what sort of prospects do you have in your career, whether that's starting afresh or continuing to thrive in whatever career you have already established. It's forming that whole picture so that we can come to a settlement, which hopefully you are both happy with at the end of the day. And I do say, ultimately, and we've touched on this as well, is that this is going from 2 incomes to 1 income. Sometimes there's a little bit of support by way of maintenance for a period, but essentially you're cutting what you have in half. And so that's never going to feel nice. It's never going to be ideal. But if you're walking away from court, God forbid if you get that stage, a judge is going to look at reasonableness and needs. And if both of you feel walking away from court that you've done okay, you're a little bit disappointed, but you've done okay, but you're not elated, that's probably about right. Ultimately, you're getting divorced. You're cutting what you have at least in half, usually most of the time. And so you're not going to feel like you've won the lottery, but you're certainly going to feel like you have the resources you need to move forward with your life and hopefully build on that and live a really happy life. And with all of us together, and all the support that you can get from family and friends, but professionals like us, the team, the trio, the finances, the lawyers, the divorce coaches, hopefully that end of the process is one to be celebrated, because you are able to step forward in your life with everything you need to do that for both yourself and your children. So, yes, long way of saying.
A very good way of saying that. Very good.
That you're going to get what you need, but it is about sitting back and thinking about what you need and how that will actually work for you moving forward.
And I think oh, sorry, go on, Ceri.
I was just going to say at this point, a discussion that I would really like to hear more of in the discussions around divorce that women are hearing is how long disclosure can take. Because I think if we go in with our eyes wide open, it is so much more useful. And actually, it will be no surprise to people on the call to know that as divorce progresses, relationships get less amicable. The most amicable start is probably right at the beginning. And if we can approach disclosure, the place where we actually share information at that point, with a little bit more clarity, we have less chance of things spiraling out of control. So to give you some context for this, when we are talking about disclosure, we're trying to establish everything that exists, not necessarily what is going to be shared, but it is common for one party to come to the table saying, this is what we've got, because it's the stuff that they are thinking that they need to share. And so we really need to have some really great open conversations about it isn't necessarily that I'm going to share this stuff. Chances are you are, if I'm honest, but it isn't necessarily that I'm going to share this stuff, but we just need to know what's on the table. And if we don't, we will spend up to 2 years getting to the place where we know what's on the table. And that is hell of a lot of legal costs, because my lawyer will not move forward until she knows what's on the table, even if we're not sharing it. And I think having the neutrality of saying, like, this is just the process, my lawyer needs to know this, or we can't move forward, or my mediator needs to know this, or we can't move forward, can help prevent the months and months and months and months of asking them, what is the value of this? Because they are coming to the table thinking, I only need to tell you this because this is all we're sharing. And it is just, if we can change that, we can have conversations about disclosure is just about everything. Even if it doesn't end up being shared, we might actually change how long disclosure takes. And just for everybody on the call, if you are not in a very amicable divorce, you can be looking at 12, 18 months of trying to get disclosure.
And the request for disclosure is not an attack, the request for disclosure. And I often have clients, generally men, but don't tell them, that resist the disclosure. They don't want to give it. And ultimately, they feel that it's like a gift being given to the other party to know all of these things about them. What they don't realize is they're also getting that gift in return, is that we have to know this information to bring this to an end. The harder you resist, the longer this is going to take, the more money you're going to spend on this. And I personally have a case at the moment, which has been ongoing for 4 years. And a lot of that delay is down to non-disclosures from one of the parties, which has resulted in, I don't even know how many hearings to date, and a very, very frustrated judge and parties, and debt now that's eating well into the matrimonial assets that would have been there otherwise. Absolutely. The disclosure process can avoid that if we just do it very amicably in an efficient way.
And I love the words you said there. Oh, sorry. I love the words you said there.
Yes, no, don't worry.
She was going to give me a compliment, so let her go.
One party can view it as an attack. And we can get this dynamic of one party feeling that they're being attacked and that the other person is nagging, and then the other party feeling that they're being secretive. And so we just get this complex set of emotions. A great place for you to come in, Kate, when reality is, if you just tell us what's there, we can have a grown-up discussion.
Yeah. I sometimes find with women as well that they feel they've not got the right to know. That actually, so that's a value piece. That's about them, working with them to understand that actually they are equals in every level, and that their ex is not up here and they're down here. It's about them understanding and bringing them so they're equal, and she has just as equal right to understand what's in the pot. Because I do think, and we're talking today and we work in this area, so we get it. But for the people that come to me that are just starting out, this feels like a huge, massive mountain, and they have no idea how they're going to get to the top. So what I do with clients is we really chunk it down, and we literally say, we will do this one step. and then we'll
One
do
thing
the
at a
next step.
time.
One thing at a
Yeah.
time, because you know the language to us is very familiar, and of course because we've all worked and do what we do for a long time, but you know, for somebody coming in, you know, it's not just a value piece, it's probably back to fear as well. It's like, how am I going to get even all this paperwork together? I mean, I had one of my first clients who had never done the finances. She didn't even have her own mobile phone insurance. I mean, she had nothing, you know. So actually, even her going out and getting her own phone insurance was something that we celebrated, and you know, and we were, and I was like, wow, that's amazing that you've gone and done that. And then by the end, she had like coloured folders with like post-it notes. I mean, she knew, you know, like you said, Ceri, it's, you can do it. Do it bit by bit, but you can get the information together. And if you have some support, and for those people that can't afford all the kind of professional support that we offer, get a financially switched on mate that can help you, that you're quite comfortable sharing those. I'm not saying for them to do any kind of negotiations, but just get them to help you sort of set up the admin folders, start to bring your paperwork together, because I also think as well, a lot of women really don't know the value of everything, including what they have as well. So
I think this is possibly a really good point just to answer me. She's put something in here about her husband trying to ring fence his assets prior to marriage, only wants to negotiate on our finances when matrimonial. This is exactly what we're talking about. He's already decided what is on the table and what's not. And this is what we're saying here is disclosure is just disclosure. He might be able to put it all off the table. That might be okay. But you can't decide that, can you, Emily? You cannot assess your legal position without it on the table.
No, I have so many of these types of cases, especially because it is an interesting bit of a shift in the law happening at the moment when it comes to premarital assets and the source of the assets and things like that. And that's kind of beyond the reach of this call, but it is something that we're seeing raised over and over again. What people fail to realize in refusing to acknowledge that the asset exists is that we can't proceed without knowing that. As I said earlier, you know, when we're looking at your legal claims, we're looking at needs, and meeting your needs is a number one priority. And so if someone is trying to ring fence the majority of assets for their own purposes and only limiting the matrimonial assets to only a small pot, it's unlikely to be able to meet needs. And the court sees needs as a number one priority. So we need to know what else is available so that we can raid whatever you're wanting to ring fence in order to meet needs. So without having all of the information, we can't make any sort of determination. And you know, it would be a real shame, but we do see is that when people become entrenched in this position, that it's, you know, you shouldn't be providing information about things they think should be ring fenced, and we end up at court. And again, then you end up with a very frustrated judge that says you shouldn't be at court. You should have provided this ages ago, in many circumstances. So yes, I mean, I would, for whoever asked that question, you know, insist that at least at a minimum that those assets be disclosed in order that you can consider the proposal that those should be ring fenced. Were there any other good questions in that chat? I'm just conscious that we've got about 10 minutes to go.
There's quite a lot of really good questions actually in there.
Amazing.
Look through.
Let's see. I see the first one. So my husband is not filing his for me. It's been more than 12 months, although he has agreed to the divorce. This is delaying matters hugely, and he's just being evasive and dismissive, saying he doesn't have the time, cannot afford legal help advice. So we will get this. And I think it kind of goes back to what Kate touched on really briefly before, is that sometimes when people are confronted with this, female or male, they freeze. And we will get this sometimes at the very beginning of the matter, and unfortunately it can last however long it takes when someone just buries their head in the sand for whatever reason. It may not necessarily mean they're trying to hide things. It may not necessarily mean they're trying to do anything to bother you. They just don't want to deal with the issue at hand. And unfortunately, you know, there's not very much we can do about this. It sounds like 12 months has already passed, which to me is a really considerable amount of time. And unless there's a really good reason for him to have not provided that information at this stage, the only way you can force someone's hand is to make an application to the court. Usually, if we're trying to push things along, we will make that threat before doing it, because we want to avoid court. You want to keep the power in your hands so that the settlement is on the terms that you want it to be, and you can agree on those terms. But if there's no other option and someone's refusing to engage and things need to come to an end, a court application will be necessary to make sure that they are on a court set deadline. And if they don't meet those deadlines, they will be subject to cost orders and things of that nature. So it's the only way to force the hand. And within that process, I should just say that once an application is made, it doesn't mean that you have to go all the way through that process. If you then settle because the form has then been provided, you can agree things and there's no need to go to court. But just to make the application may push things along. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that. I mean, Kate, you might have experience with people delaying things, and perhaps there was a way you may have gone about pushing things along from your side.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult situation if somebody just won't engage in the process. You know, you can't, you know, I mean, eventually you can force people to, but it's going to take money and it's going to take lawyers. So, I mean, for me, it's difficult. So normally I would understand what the relationship was like between them and actually look at communication strategies and actually look at ways to kind of not chip away in a negative way, but sort of, you know, communicate as much as you possibly can do. Obviously, I don't know the dynamics of their relationship, so it's quite difficult to kind of advise on that. If not, I would say if funds are restricted, then, you know, if this is something that's really sticking and you can't move forward because of it and because you really want to move forward, then perhaps drop other costs and focus on that just so you can get it over the line and you can get that form in and move on. And sometimes that's about sort of helping people understand almost the end goal as well. And actually, what do we need to sacrifice now to help us get on the process to that end goal? I agree with you, 12 months is a long time. You know, I see clients that don't want to fill the form in because they're nervous of it, but 12 months for me feels too long to wait. You know, as Ceri said, you know, this is a long process. It's not something that happens overnight. So yeah, I would, if you can, communicate about it as best as you can, and if not, look at what you can sacrifice to jump that hurdle and then move forward.
Ceri, this is one that you might be able to help with, is that someone has asked, how can we both be rehoused and meet basic needs when there simply isn't enough money? I mean, I know from my perspective, but is there any tools that you look to when you're looking at a case that perhaps doesn't have as much money as we would like it to?
So I'm probably not the best person to ask because I work exclusively with women divorcing wealthy and powerful men. So I work in the most elite marriages where there are millions on the table. So I don't come across this scenario. Typically, I don't have the experience of that. And when I look at it, part of the reason that I made that choice to work where I do is because sometimes they're just really impossible choices to be made in divorce where there isn't enough money to go around. And I found it really heartbreaking. I find it really difficult to be in a situation where it's a case of, okay, there is going to need to be a really creative solution here. One of the creative solutions I have seen is nesting, which is where there is just one property. And, you know, be that rented, be that a purchase, and the children stay put and the parents share time, you know, so you come in and out, you might be there 3 days, husband there 3 days, you're there 3 days. And in between, depending on finances, you either stay with a family member, you stay in an Airbnb, maybe there's a really small rental place that you get. It is tricky, you know, nesting is really, takes a lot of compromise, but it can be the cheapest way of keeping things going.
Yeah, and that provides some stability for the children as well. But I will say, in my experience, that takes a special couple.
It takes yeah. I mean, you're still cleaning up without the other person, and they're in there with their stuff, and you're having, you know, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. But if you are constrained, it is a way of just having one house and then still being able to actually make ends meet.
Yeah. I also think as well. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Oh, and they've put nesting's not an option as he's abusive. Yeah.
So definitely not. Yeah.
Definitely not. And yeah, I just, you know, if there's not enough money, there's not enough money. It's just, I genuinely don't.
Been in so many hearings like this where ultimately a judge will reference you have to cut your cloth. You know, you're not going to be necessarily in exactly the same position as you were before. You may not be able to purchase again, but you both need to be given equal opportunity to do whatever it is that you can do following divorce. Of course, ideally, there's enough money to go around and you can both purchase the property of your dreams, but that's just not always the case. So then it's about looking to fairness rather than needs. And in many cases, depending on the length of the marriage, and again, I could go on forever, that might be looking initially at a 50-50. What does that look like? Is that enough for each person to support themselves? There's lots of different factors. And what you'll find as you go through the process is this is very fact specific. There is not one black and white answer. This results in so many different arrangements. Nesting is one of them. You may have a measure order, which is something where you stay in the house till the kids reach the age of 18 and then it's sold. So there's lots of different things about being creative, thinking about what your objectives are and what you want, and then trying as much as possible to fit a settlement around that.
There's also options that you can look at as well. So you may be entitled to more benefits than you realise. There may be secondary income that you can pull together. And also as well, you know, first time, I mean, obviously I don't know the situation of this, but, you know, I actually had a friend who went through this situation and there was no way near enough money in the pot. So she got a shared ownership property instead, which, yeah, all right, her and her three kids are kind of piled in, but they're safe and she's happy. And she's working towards sort of training at work so that she can earn more money. So yeah, I agree with you, Ceri. It's so upsetting because actually there isn't that many options, and I suppose it's heartbreaking, and it's just about trying to get as creative as you can, and remember that yeah, this is really tough at the moment, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay this way. It doesn't mean that that's how the rest of your life is mapped out. Actually, get yourself safe, get your family safe, get some peace, rebuild. And part of rebuilding and resilience is actually looking at finances and earning more money and training and developing and creating that future for yourself.
And I thought on that point, and maybe a nice point to sort of end the session on, Kate, is, you know, you do need resilience to get through this process. I was on the phone with the client this morning and he's just at the very beginning. And I said, unfortunately, it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, but there is light at the end of the tunnel and we're going to get there. I mean, any top tips for keeping your sanity, feeling good about yourself, a little self-care? We want all the ladies on the chat to feel like they can stand in their power, feel empowered, go through this process, make it through, get to the other side. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, so I mean, resilience is interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of talk about resilience, and I think resilience for me is not becoming rigid so that things just bash off you. Resilience is actually getting yourself into a really good place so that you can navigate the complexities and the challenges ahead. And I think one thing that I sort of say with all my clients is get your foundations right. You cannot do this process and you cannot rebuild on shaky ground. You have to get your nutrition right, get your sleep right, get your exercise right, have a safe space somewhere. I know a lot of people out there, I can see it in the chat now, are having to still live with people after they've separated. So even if that safe space is a spot in the garden or somewhere out of the home, have somewhere where you can go to decompress. And then what I say to people then is get your foundations in and then we layer and we create a toolkit. So well-being is used a lot, but you have to find what works for you. You don't have to go and do a yoga class. You might hate yoga, you know? So what I always say to clients is, we've got the foundations in place. What do you really like to do? What makes you happy? Not what you think you should do, you know? What do you actually like to do? And quite simply, just do more of it. You know, start to layer those things in that make you feel good. Support network is really important. And that's not just professionals like us. And as I can see in the chat, not everyone can afford to have a team of people around them, you know? So actually we've all got them, haven't we? We've all got the vampires or the drains or whatever they're called, where we kind of meet them for a coffee and we're exhausted by the end because we've taken all those woes on. So get those people that make you feel good about yourself. Get those radiators. and spend more time with them, you know, and actually slowly you will start to build a life that means something to you, that is for you. And I think from that, resilience and empower grows. And I think one of the most important things that I always say to my clients is, look, this is really tough. It's long, it's tough, it's complicated, it's difficult. So you need to start to find a way to actually find some moments of joy in your day. So I would say to anybody out there, learning to practice gratitude for me is one of the most powerful things you can do. Whatever happens in your day, get to the end of your day. You don't have to write it down. You don't have to do anything with it, and just come up with 3 things that happened that day. Could have been a nice cup of coffee, a walk with a friend, whatever. Start to look for the good within this as well, you know. And if you get to the end of the day and you genuinely don't have one, then your challenge the next day is to make one. Make that
Yeah.
one moment that will make you feel better, you know. And as we all know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So take your time to get that resilience really going.
I love that. And I think that's, you know, a message for not everyone attending this, but for everyone, period.
Yeah.
What was the shampoo ad? It might be a North American thing, but you're worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was him, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can see we've got loads of questions flooding in. I feel like we might need to come back, ladies, to have a look. I think, especially Ceri, there's a lot around pensions coming in, isn't there? I can see that.
Yeah, there is. I can't keep up with them. I'm trying to answer it, but I'm trying to listen also. So yeah, we'll answer afterwards, I think, shall we?
Yeah, we'll take a look. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We can do that. Let's look at the questions. And I also think as well, like, if you guys are happy to, we could possibly come back and just do a Q&A for an hour, and then at least we could maybe work through these and just, you know, look at things like pensions
I
and
was
family
going to
home and
suggest
stuff.
that. I think it says in quite a few times in the chat that people have found this useful, which is amazing for us because we just want to help. So if there's an appetite for a further session where we just answer questions, we can absolutely do that. And we can put a date forward for that. So do let us know in the chat if that is something that you would be up for, and we will put the wheels in motion. It's been an absolute pleasure, ladies. And I'm glad that some of you found this helpful. Do get in touch with any of us if you need any help throughout the process, to help and support in any way that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.